My name is Claire Bennett, I'm 27, and 3 days ago my grandfather grabbed my wrist with more strength than a dying man should have and whispered 4 words that changed everything. Test them. Trust no one. I nodded, confused, my heart pounding as the machines beeped around him. He squeezed my hand once more, like he was trying to press the memory into my skin, then closed his eyes. I called my dad immediately, my voice shaking. Grandpa wants to see everyone. Come now. But Grandpa didn't want a goodbye. He wanted a test. By the time my father arrived, Grandpa was already gone. And within an hour of his last breath, before the funeral home even called back, my father was on the phone with a lawyer, and my aunt was already measuring the living room for new furniture. That's when I understood. Grandpa knew exactly what he was leaving behind. And so did I. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and something else. Something quieter, like time running out. I'd been sitting beside Grandpa's bed for 6 hours straight, watching the machines trace his heartbeat in soft green lines. He'd raised me half the time growing up, taught me how to fish, how to balance a checkbook, how to spot a liar by the way they avoided your eyes. So when his hand suddenly closed around my wrist, I nearly dropped my phone. His eyes were barely open, but they were sharp, sharper than they'd been in weeks. Test them, he rasped. Trust no one. I laughed nervously, thinking he was confused, maybe dreaming. Grandpa, it's just me, Claire. But he shook his head, urgent now, like he was fighting through fog to say one more true thing before the fog won. You'll know what I mean. Soon. I nodded, more to comfort him than because I understood. I called my dad right after, my voice cracking as I told him to come now, that Grandpa was asking for everyone. But Grandpa didn't ask for everyone. He never mentioned anyone else's name. Just mine. By the time my father walked through the door 20 minutes later, Grandpa's eyes were closed for good. I sat there holding his hand, replaying those 4 words over and over, unaware that the real test, the one he'd warned me about, had already begun before his heart even stopped. Grief has a certain silence to it, or at least that's what I expected. Instead, the silence lasted about 40 minutes. I was still sitting in that plastic hospital chair, Grandpa's hand going cold in mine, when I heard my father's voice out in the hallway. Whoa, Clip. Not grieving, calculating. No, I need to know if the house transfers automatically or if we need probate, he was saying. Froze. My grandfather hadn't been gone an hour. When I stepped out, Dad quickly hung up and rearranged his face into something softer. Just handling logistics, sweetheart, he said. Logistics. Grandpa's body wasn't even out of the room yet. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my Aunt Diane, who hadn't visited the hospital once in the past 2 weeks. So sorry about Dad. Also, do you know if he kept the deed to the house in his safe or with the lawyer? I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. She hadn't asked how he passed. She hadn't asked if I was okay. She asked about a deed. By that evening, before we'd even chosen a funeral home, Diane had already called a real estate agent, just to get a sense of value. My cousin Mark posted a vague, sentimental tribute online, followed 20 minutes later by a private message asking if I thought Grandpa's truck was up for grabs. I sat alone in my car outside the hospital, gripping the steering wheel, Grandpa's whispered warning finally starting to make sense. He hadn't been confused. He'd been right. And the test, whatever it was, had already started without me. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and stronger coffee, the kind meant to keep people calm during something that was never going to be calm. We sat around a long table, my father, Aunt Diane, cousin Mark, and me, all of us dressed like we were attending a funeral, though the actual funeral wasn't for 2 more days. Mr. Holbrook, Grandpa's attorney of almost 30 years, adjusted his glasses and began reading in that flat, practiced tone lawyers use when they already know the room is about to explode. The house, the savings, the old fishing cabin up north. Item by item, Grandpa's life got divided into paragraphs. Then Holbrook paused. The remainder of the estate, including the property on Miller Lane, is left to be determined based on conditions outlined in a supplementary document. Diane sat up straight. Conditions? What conditions? Holbrook simply said Grandpa had left instructions to be revealed later, under his discretion. My father's jaw tightened. That's not how a will works. Everything should be spelled out today. Diane's voice sharpened too. Is someone trying to manipulate this? Did he change something recently? And there it was, that look. The same one I'd caught weeks ago between Dad and Diane at a family dinner, quick and unreadable, gone before anyone could call it out. But I saw it again now, clearer this time, right after Holbrook mentioned conditions. They weren't confused. They were worried. Worried that Grandpa had seen something in them before he died, something he hadn't told the rest of us. I sat quietly, replaying his whispered words again. Test them. Trust no one. For the first time, I understood he wasn't warning me about strangers. He was warning me about the people sitting at this very table. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Grandpa's whispered words, turning them over like a stone in my palm. Test them. Trust no one. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't a dying man's fog. Grandpa had never said a wasted word in his life, and he wasn't about to start on his last night on Earth. Then I remembered something from years ago. I was maybe 19, sitting on his porch shelling peas when he told me almost offhand, Claire, people show you who they are the moment money enters the room. Not before. Not after. Right in that moment. I hadn't thought about that conversation in years, but suddenly it felt less like advice and more like a blueprint. I sat up in bed and pulled out my laptop, staring at a blank message to my father and Diane. If Grandpa wanted me to test them, then I needed a test small enough to seem harmless, but revealing enough to show their true hand. An idea began forming. Something about a second document, a supposed missing folder from Grandpa's office, one that might mention an additional asset no one knew about. It wasn't a lie, not really. It was bait. And if Grandpa had taught me anything, it was that the truth reveals itself fastest when people think there's something left to gain. I didn't know yet what I'd uncover, or how far my family would go once they smelled more money on the table. But I knew one thing for certain. Grandpa hadn't just asked me to trust my instincts. He'd handed me the exact tool I'd need to protect myself, and expose everyone else in the process. The next morning I sent a simple text to the family group chat. Found a folder in Grandpa's office labeled Miller Lane, Additional Assets. Haven't opened it yet, wanted to wait until we're all together. I hit send and set my phone face down on the counter, my heart hammering. There was no folder. Not yet anyway. But I wanted to see who would respond first, and how fast. Diane replied within 90 seconds. Don't open it without me there. I mean it, Claire. Wait for me. No, how are you holding up? No mention of Grandpa at all. Just urgency, sharp and unmistakable. My father called 4 minutes later. What kind of assets? Is it another property? Investments. His voice had none of the calm, grieving tone from the hospital. It was fast, almost breathless, like a man trying not to sound greedy while failing completely. Even Mark, who'd barely said 2 words to me since the funeral home visit, texted separately, asking if I could just snap a photo of whatever's inside. No rush, just curious. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone, watching 3 people who claimed to be grieving suddenly transform into 3 people negotiating for information. Not one of them asked if I needed help. Not one of them mentioned Grandpa's name. By the end of the day, Diane had shown up at my apartment unannounced, just to see how I was doing, though her eyes kept drifting toward my bag like the folder might be hiding inside it. That's when I understood Grandpa's plan wasn't cruel. It was clarity. He'd given me a mirror, and everyone around me was walking straight into it. 3 days after the funeral, Mr. Holbrook called and asked me to come in alone. No father, no Diane, no Mark. Just me. I sat across from him, still rattled from watching my family circle like vultures over a folder that didn't even exist, and he slid a sealed envelope across the desk with my name written in Grandpa's unmistakable handwriting. He left this specifically for you, Holbrook said. Instructions were clear, only after you'd had time to see how the family behaved. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter, dated almost 8 months earlier. Grandpa wrote that he'd noticed things. Diane pressuring him about the house, my father quietly asking about account balances during visits that were supposed to be just family time. He'd grown suspicious, and instead of confronting them, he'd decided to watch. Quietly, patiently. The way he taught me to fish. Wait long enough, and the truth surfaces on its own. Attached to the letter was a second document. A private trust set up months ago, holding the majority of his actual savings. Far more than anyone realized he had. It wasn't left to be divided. It was left entirely to me with one condition. That I use part of it to look after myself first, and only share with family members who proved, through their actions and not their words, that they still saw me as family and not as a shortcut to money. I sat there holding the letter, tears finally falling, not from grief alone but from something else. Relief. Grandpa hadn't just warned me. He'd protected me the whole time. I didn't rush to tell anyone what was in that letter. For once, I let silence do what Grandpa had taught me. Reveal the truth without a single word from me. At the next family gathering, I watched them still circling, still whispering about the missing folder, still assuming there was more to find. I finally spoke up, calm and steady. There's no hidden folder, I said. But there was a test. And I think you all already know how you did. My father's face went pale. Diane opened her mouth to argue, then stopped because deep down, she knew exactly what I meant. Mark just looked at the floor, quiet for the first time in weeks. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I simply told them Grandpa had seen everything. The calls before his body was even cold, the questions about deeds and trucks and property values before a single tear was shed. I told them the trust existed and that I'd decide in time who still deserved to be part of my life going forward. Not because of money. Because of character. Some relationships in my family never recovered. Others slowly, quietly began to rebuild, the ones built on something real instead of inheritance. Grandpa's whispered words replay in my mind sometimes, usually when it's quiet, usually right before I fall asleep. Test them. Trust no one. He wasn't warning me out of bitterness. He was giving me one last gift, the truth and the strength to act on it. If you were in my place, would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments below.